Fort Knox, a name synonymous with impenetrable security. Tucked away in the hills of Kentucky and surrounded by an active military post, its granite-lined walls and 20-ton door are said to protect the wealth of a nation. The United States Treasury says it holds over 147 million troy ounces of American gold, a glittering symbol of economic strength. For nearly a century, it has stood as a bastion of confidence, the very bedrock of the US dollar. But what if it's all an act? What if that fortress is just a grand illusion? For decades, whispers of doubt have grown into deafening shouts from politicians, entrepreneurs, and ordinary people asking one unthinkable question: are the vaults of Fort Knox actually empty? These theories aren't just hiding in the dark corners of the internet anymore. They're being discussed in the halls of power. We're looking at the evidence, the accounts, and the documents to uncover the truth behind one of America's greatest secrets. The story of Fort Knox is far more complex and far more disturbing than you've ever been told. So has the world's largest gold reserve just vanished? The official story is that of an impenetrable fortress. The unofficial story is that of a multi-trillion-dollar lie. Stick with us as we dive into the evidence, because to find the truth, we first have to go back to the beginning, the legend of Fort Knox. To understand the mystery, you first have to understand the legend. The story of Fort Knox starts in a time of desperation, the Great Depression. In 1933, with banks failing and the economy in ruins, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. This controversial order made it illegal for private citizens to own gold coins, bullion, or certificates. Americans were forced to turn in their personal gold to the Federal Reserve for cash. Overnight, the U.S. government had the largest pile of gold the world had ever seen. But this treasure created a new problem: where to keep it safe. Existing vaults were seen as too vulnerable, too close to cities and coasts, and open to attack or theft. America needed a new kind of fortress, something that was both secure and a powerful symbol of stability. So in 1936, construction began on the United States Bullion Depository at Fort Knox, Kentucky. The spot was picked for its isolation, deep inside a massive army base. The building itself was a marvel of defense. Its walls were made of feet-thick granite, steel, and concrete, built to withstand bombs and any tool imaginable. The heart of the fortress is its main vault, guarded by a 20-ton blast-proof door. To open it, a team of specialists must each dial a separate combination known only to them. No single person knows the entire sequence. In 1937, the first gold shipments arrived on special, heavily guarded trains. By the end of the operation, Fort Knox was a modern-day dragon's hoard. During World War II, America's total gold reserves peaked at over 650 million troy ounces, holding about a third of the world's entire reserves at the time. Its reputation became so absolute that it held more than just gold. During the war, it became the safe house for America's most priceless artifacts, including the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and even England's Magna Carta. Fort Knox wasn't just a vault, it was a sanctuary. Its purpose was to give Americans unwavering faith in their currency. But ironically, the secrecy that once built trust now fuels the deepest suspicion. The cracks in the facade. For a place meant to build public faith, Fort Knox is incredibly secretive. Public access is forbidden. Even high-ranking politicians are almost never allowed inside. This secrecy has created a vacuum where troubling questions grow. The biggest problem, the one that fuels every conspiracy theory, is the audit, or more accurately, the lack of one. There has not been a full, comprehensive, and independent audit of the gold inside Fort Knox in over 70 years. The last one happened in 1953 after President Eisenhower took office. A team went in, checked a small fraction of the gold, about 5%, and used that to estimate the rest. Since then, no outside independent group has been allowed in to count the bars and verify their quality. The U.S. government is essentially asking the world to take it on faith that hundreds of billions of dollars in gold is still there. The government has made gestures toward transparency, but they often raise more questions than they answer. The most famous example was in 1974. With public anxiety growing, Fort Knox opened its doors for a managed tour. A small group of congressmen and journalists was invited inside. They were shown one compartment of the vault with stacks of gold bars. Photos from that day were meant to prove the treasure was safe, but skeptics saw it as a staged photo op. The visitors saw only a tiny fraction of the total reserve. They couldn't handle the bars or run any tests. Was it real transparency or a show designed to calm everyone down while the real story stayed hidden? The event proved there was some gold in Fort Knox, not that all of it was there. This refusal to allow a full accounting is the critical crack in the facade. If the nearly 147 million ounces of gold are really there, what's the harm in proving it? An independent audit would end every conspiracy theory overnight. The fact that they won't do it has led many to a chilling conclusion. The government is avoiding an audit because it knows what the results will be. The investigation. When official answers don't come, theories thrive. And the theories about the Fort Knox gold have grown from whispers to a roar, implicating the highest levels of government. The most direct is the empty vault theory. It says the gold is just gone, secretly sold or traded away over decades. Why? Proponents point to America's massive national debt, arguing that different administrations sold off the gold to fund wars or secret operations. After President Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard in 1971, the gold was no longer needed to back the currency. To some, it was just an asset that could be sold off in secret. Then there's the more sinister tungsten bricks theory. This suggests the vaults aren't empty, but what's inside is worthless. The gold bars, it's claimed, were drilled out and filled with tungsten, a metal with nearly the same density as gold. A gold-plated tungsten bar feels just as heavy and passes a quick inspection. You'd have to drill into it or use sophisticated tests to find the fake. In 2012, reports surfaced that tungsten-filled gold bars were found in the private market in Manhattan, proving the method is very real. While there is no credible evidence of this happening at Fort Knox, theorists suggest this swap would be the perfect cover. The vault would have the right number of bars with the right total weight, but it would all be a multi-trillion-dollar fraud. A third theory suggests the gold is physically there, but the U.S. no longer owns it. This is the leased or pledged theory. Here, the gold has been leased to other banks or pledged as collateral for huge loans. If true, the Treasury could legally say the gold is at Fort Knox, while the ownership belongs to someone else. America would just be guarding gold for its creditors, a secret that could trigger a global financial panic if revealed. These were once fringe ideas, but they've moved into the mainstream, thanks to public figures voicing the same doubts. For years, former Congressman Ron Paul made a public audit of Fort Knox a key part of his platform, arguing the government's resistance was suspicious. More recently, these calls have gotten louder. In early 2025, former President Donald Trump reignited the debate, telling the public, "We're going to Fort Knox to check if the gold is there, as someone might have stolen it." His statement treated the possibility not as a conspiracy, but as a real concern. This shift in public discourse has turned the mystery into a public demand for proof. If you think there's more to this story, and that transparency is essential when it comes to a nation's wealth, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We're always digging into the secrets they don't want you to know, the official defense, and the lingering questions. So what does the government say? The U.S. Treasury and the U.S. Mint insist the gold is there, safe, and accounted for. They say the reserves are audited annually by the Treasury's own Office of the Inspector General, and that they publish monthly reports. To back this up, they point to the most recent high-profile visit. In 2017, then Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin led a small civilian group including Kentucky politicians on a tour. Afterward, he tweeted, "Glad the gold is safe." But for critics, this was just a repeat of the 1974 tour, a controlled photo op, not an audit. The group saw a single room and couldn't test or count anything. For many, it looked like the government was trying to distract the public rather than provide real proof. The strongest argument in the government's defense is the sheer logistical nightmare of stealing the gold. We're talking about over 4,580 metric tons of metal. That's the weight of about 80 modern battle tanks, enough to fill roughly 10 standard shipping containers. Removing that much material from one of the most secure facilities on Earth seems impossible. It would require a huge conspiracy and a years-long operation. Surely someone would have talked. This remains the biggest hurdle for any theory that the vault is empty. And yet the questions remain. The logistics argument doesn't address the tungsten or leasing theories, and it doesn't explain the central burning question. If the gold is there, why not prove it? Why allow figures like Donald Trump to undermine public faith when one transparent audit could end the debate forever? For many, the government's refusal to provide definitive proof is the most compelling evidence that there is something to hide. So where does that leave us? The mystery of Fort Knox is a clash of two different stories. On one hand, you have the official story from the US government. They say Fort Knox is a symbol of American might, its vaults full of gold. They argue the secrecy is necessary and that the conspiracy theories are just baseless speculation. On the other hand, you have a story of deep doubt, now shared by millions. This story is built on 70 years without a real independent audit. It's fueled by a government that offers photo ops instead of proof. It's supported by plausible theories of how the gold could have been sold, replaced, or leased away, and is now championed by influential voices. Is Fort Knox protecting America's wealth, or is it the world's most elaborate stage, hiding a secret that could shatter the global economy? The government tells us everything is fine, but the questions and the doubts aren't going away. What do you think? Has the evidence convinced you something is wrong, or do you believe the official story? Is the gold still safe in Fort Knox, or has America's greatest treasure vanished into thin air? Let us know your theory in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you enjoyed this investigation, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.